Alex Carter heard the words that shattered his world, not from a stranger or a lawyer, but from his wife's own mouth, inches from another man's ear. "If I'd met you before Alex, I never would have married him," Serafina whispered, her fingers brushing Dorian Castell's cufflink, her laugh low, private, meant only for him. And Dorian, polished and smug, leaned in with a smirk. "I don't think he'd bother us anyway." Alex had come to surprise her. Instead, standing just steps from them under the glow of Manhattan's most exclusive gala, he felt his chest split open, not with rage, but with a cold, clean emptiness. 20 years of building a life, a marriage, a family, erased in one breathless confession. And when her eyes flicked up and caught his across the crowd, Serafina froze. For the first time, Alex saw her mask slip, and what was underneath wasn't regret. It was calculation. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The invitation had been sitting on Alex Carter's kitchen counter for days, half buried under his work papers, unopened. A gala at the plaza, black tie, Serafina's firm hosting a fundraiser for some elite corporate initiative, likely a merger deal or a tax-sheltered cause. She'd told him he didn't need to come. "It's just work, Alex. You hate these things." She hadn't said it cruelly. She never did. Serafina Vale, his wife of nearly 15 years, had a way of brushing past him with that smooth, effortless tone, polished, professional, honey-laced when necessary. Alex, with his quiet nature and laser-focused work ethic, had long accepted that they lived in different orbits. But that night, something in him resisted. Maybe it was the way she lingered by the mirror before leaving, adjusting her diamond earring with a careful flick. Maybe it was the way she barely glanced at him when she murmured, "Don't wait up." Maybe it was just the way the apartment felt. Too big, too glassy, too silent once she was gone. So Alex shaved, dressed in his black suit, and called for a car. By the time he stepped out at the plaza, Manhattan's sky had already gone indigo, the towers shimmering gold above. The doormen waved him through without question. He knew most of them by name. Inside, the music floated like perfume, soft jazz threading between conversations. Men in sharp suits circled women in backless gowns. Alex moved quietly through the crowd, a man used to observing more than belonging. And then he saw her. Serafina. She stood near the terrace doors, laughing, really laughing, head tilted back, eyes gleaming. She wore that ice blue gown she'd claimed was a practical investment, but which clung to her like second skin. Beside her stood Dorian Castell, her colleague, a man Alex had only met twice, but remembered clearly. Tall, elegant, silver-streaked at the temples, exuding the kind of charisma that made people lean in without realizing. Alex froze. It was the way Serafina's hand grazed Dorian's wrist, the way her body tilted just slightly toward him, the way Dorian smiled. Not wide, not eager, but slow and knowing. And then Alex heard it, unmistakable over the clink of glasses and low music. "If I'd met you before Alex," Serafina murmured, voice like velvet, "I never would have married him." Dorian leaned in, eyes half-lidded, and smiled. "I don't think he'd bother us anyway." Alex's chest tightened, his fingers curling reflexively at his sides. It was not the kind of anger he'd ever known. No hot flare, no urge to storm over or make a scene. It was cold, precise, hollowing. He took a step back, breath caught in his throat. Serafina's laugh caught midair as her eyes lifted and met his. For a split second, everything around them blurred. The servers with champagne flutes, the swirling laughter, the glint of chandeliers. It all vanished under the sharp, electric thread that stretched between husband and wife. Serafina's smile faltered. Her lips parted just slightly, a flicker of something. Panic, calculation, regret, flashing across her face. Alex held her gaze. He felt no urge to run, no urge to confront. He just saw her, fully, maybe for the first time in years. Then he turned, stepped back into the crowd, and walked away. Outside, the city air bit at his skin. The doorman asked if he needed a cab, but Alex shook his head, slipping his hands into his coat pockets, shoulders tight. He walked, past the plaza's glittering awnings, past couples laughing on the sidewalk, past the hum of a city that didn't know or care that, inside his chest, something old and foundational had just been shattered. When he reached home, the penthouse was dark. Only the skyline lit the windows, glass towers blinking like indifferent eyes. He sat at the kitchen counter, poured himself a whiskey, and stared at the divorce papers. They weren't signed, not even filled out yet. A draft his lawyer had sent months ago, just in case. Serafina had always been brilliant. He'd admired that about her, back when admiration was still something shared between them. She'd climbed fast, law school to partner to boardroom deals, and Alex, in his quieter world of AI labs and software contracts, had stayed largely invisible in the elite circles they orbited. Maybe that was the start of it. Or maybe it was the nights she came home drunk and dismissive, brushing off his quiet concern with a wave of her manicured hand. The small cuts that bled out slowly, missed dinners, silences that stretched too long, Caleb's whispered questions. "Where's Mom tonight?" That Alex didn't know how to answer. It wasn't that he was blind. It was that he had let himself believe loyalty could hold together what love had stopped patching. Around 3 a.m., the door slammed open. Serafina stumbled in, heels dangling from her hand, hair tousled, the sharp scent of champagne and perfume trailing behind her. She froze when she saw Alex sitting at the counter. "Oh, come on, Alex," she slurred slightly, setting her shoes down too hard. "Don't be dramatic." He didn't speak, didn't have to. Her eyes flicked to the papers on the counter, the neat glass of untouched whiskey beside them. "Seriously?" She scoffed, voice sharpening. "You're actually doing this?" Alex met her gaze, steady and quiet. "I saw you." For the first time, Serafina hesitated. Her mouth opened, then shut, the mask slipping for just a second. "You've been checked out for years," she muttered, voice low and bitter now. "You care more about your company than your marriage, more about your projects than me." Alex's fingers brushed the edge of the glass, not lifting it. "I want a divorce." She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're not serious." But as she stood there, wobbling slightly in her designer dress, makeup smudged, eyes flickering between defiance and something like fear, Alex saw her clearly. Not the brilliant wife, not the high-powered partner, but a woman who had already left long ago. He rose, walking past her without another word, and closed the bedroom door behind him. And for the first time in years, he slept. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The morning after Serafina stumbled in was glass-bright and brutally honest. Alex sat at the kitchen island, untouched coffee cooling beside him. He'd been up for hours, going over the divorce paperwork again, rereading legal language that tasted like ash in his mouth. Upstairs, Serafina's faint movements drifted down, the shower running, the scrape of closet doors, the sound of heels hitting the floor. She was preparing herself, her armor, her mask, while Alex sat below, watching his marriage rot in real time. When she finally emerged, it was like nothing had happened. "Don't forget, Caleb has a dental appointment this week," she said briskly, scrolling her phone as she grabbed her handbag. She didn't meet his eyes, didn't pause at the sight of the divorce papers still on the counter. "Serafina," Alex said, voice low, steady. She paused, finally glancing up. "I want you to sign them." For a second, there was something in her face, surprise maybe, or irritation masked as surprise. Then she gave a cool smile. "Alex, you've been threatening this for months." She reached for her sunglasses. "You'll calm down." "You always do." This time, Alex didn't stop her as she walked out the door, but something in his chest locked into place. He wasn't waiting anymore. That afternoon, Alex met Jason Landry, the forensic accountant, at a quiet coffee shop off Madison Avenue. Jason was a discreet man, mid-50s, glasses perched low on his nose, his manner calm, almost apologetic. "I'm going to be direct," Jason said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's worse than you think." Alex opened it. There were bank statements, wire transfers, and offshore account details. "She's been pulling money out for at least 14 months, Jason explained. "Small amounts at first, but then larger, funneling them through a shell corporation tied to this." He pointed to a property record. Alex felt his chest tighten. It was a penthouse apartment in Tribeca, under the name of one of Dorian Castell's investment entities. "Dorian's name is all over the financial trail," Jason continued. "This isn't just about the affair, Alex. They're moving to push you out of your own company." Alex sat back, jaw tightening. "How?" Jason exhaled. "They've been quietly swaying board members. Between Serafina's influence and Dorian's promises, they're framing you as fatigued, creative burnout, executive detachment." He met Alex's eyes carefully. "They're painting you as the problem." Alex left the cafe into the biting afternoon wind, something sharp and silent curling inside his chest. He'd built his company from his 20s, poured every ounce of himself into it, driven by ideas, by passion, by late nights that blurred into dawn. Serafina had been there at the start, charming investors, refining contracts, playing the part of the supportive partner. Somewhere along the way, that partnership had shifted, then cracked, and now it was gone. But he hadn't seen, hadn't wanted to see, just how far she'd taken it. That night, Alex sat at the dining table long after the apartment was dark, the skyline glittering like indifferent stars through the window. He pulled out an old envelope, medical records from when Caleb was born, documents from a time when he and Serafina had briefly separated. He remembered the months apart, the reconciliation, the sudden announcement that she was pregnant. At the time, he'd wanted to believe in second chances. But now, as he pieced together timelines and old truths, doubt bloomed. His hands were steady as he packed a few strands of Caleb's hair into a discreet DNA test kit. The pain came later, in the quiet, when the apartment was asleep and Alex sat alone in the dark, hands clasped, head bowed. The next morning, Caleb bounced into the kitchen, 12 years old, full of effortless, unthinking joy. "Dad, you're making pancakes?" Alex smiled, mussed his son's hair, and flipped a pancake onto his plate. "Thought I'd surprise you." Caleb grinned, mouth full. "Where's Mom?" "She had to leave early." Alex said softly. Work. As Caleb chatted about school and basketball practice, Alex watched him carefully, the curve of his smile, the tilt of his eyes, the light in his face. And something in Alex's heart clenched tight, protective, unbreakable. No matter what the test said, Caleb was his. Days later, when the envelope came, Alex opened it alone. The results were clear. Biologically, Dorian Castell was Caleb's father. Alex sat still, the paper crackling faintly in his hands. There was no surge of rage, no violent heartbreak, only a cold, clean realization. Serafina had taken everything, but she would not take his son. Meanwhile, Serafina moved with terrifying precision. She began slipping suggestions into Caleb's ear, small, casual things. Your dad works too much, doesn't he? Dorian says you're a natural leader. We just want you to have opportunities. Dorian became a constant shadow, showing up at Caleb's games, sending expensive gifts, offering mentorship. Alex saw it all, the slow pull, the quiet poisoning, but he stayed steady. He would not tear Caleb in half with accusations. He would not make his son choose. Not yet. And then, unexpectedly, Layla Moreno appeared. A late-night message, a request to meet, a cautious voice on the phone. Layla, the junior associate at Serafina's firm, young, overlooked, exhausted. I can't stand what they're doing, she told Alex when they met in a downtown cafe, her fingers trembling slightly around her coffee cup. They're ruthless, but I've been saving everything. She handed him a USB drive. Inside were emails, internal memos, payment records, proof of insider trading, sexual harassment settlements, asset manipulation. Why are you helping me? Alex asked quietly. Layla met his eyes, fierce for a moment. Because I used to believe in them, and now I don't. That weekend, Alex attended Caleb's basketball game, sitting quietly in the bleachers. Dorian arrived late, sliding into the row behind Alex, casually draping his arm along the seat. Alex, Dorian murmured, voice low and smooth. We should talk. Alex turned, gaze cool. We'll see each other soon. The weight of it hung between them, not a threat, not a warning, just a fact. Later that night, as Alex tucked Caleb into bed, Caleb hesitated. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Why are you and Mom fighting so much? Alex swallowed hard, brushing Caleb's hair back gently. Sometimes people forget what's important, he said softly. But I never forget you. Caleb threw his arms around his father, small and warm and fierce. I don't want you to go anywhere, Dad. Alex closed his eyes, holding his son tight. I'm not going anywhere. In the apartment's quiet after Caleb slept, Alex stood by the window, Manhattan's lights stretching out below. The city pulsed with power, greed, ambition, everything Serafina and Dorian had chosen. Alex had built his life on quiet strength, on showing up, on staying. Now he would fight, not just for his company, not just for his name, but for the only thing that had ever mattered. He watched the night, the reflection of himself in the glass, the silhouette of his son asleep in the next room. The storm was here, and Alex was ready. The night before the board meeting, Alex barely slept. He lay awake in the dim light of his bedroom, the hum of the city outside his window pressing against the glass like a restless heartbeat. His mind ran through every detail, every piece of evidence Layla had delivered, every asset list Jason had confirmed, every line in the DNA report that still sat locked in his desk drawer. For weeks, Alex had watched his life peel apart, his company, his marriage, his role as a father. But now, the shift was happening inside him. A cold, measured clarity replacing the ache. This was no longer about saving his marriage. It was about protecting what mattered. And what mattered wasn't Serafina. It was Caleb. The next morning, Alex stood at the kitchen stove, flipping pancakes for his son. Caleb came in with sleepy hair and a tired grin, plopping into a seat at the island. "Basketball practice after school today, Dad. You coming?" Alex smiled softly. "Wouldn't miss it." Caleb watched him for a beat, brows drawing together. "Mom says you're going through a hard time." His voice was cautious, small. Alex's chest tightened, but he crouched down to Caleb's eye level. "You don't need to worry about me, buddy. I'm always here for you." Caleb's face broke into a quick smile, and Alex felt the smallest crack of light cut through the heavy walls around his heart. That afternoon, Alex pulled into the parking lot of Caleb's school just as practice let out. Caleb was laughing with friends, sneakers squeaking on the pavement, sweat on his forehead. But it wasn't just the kids Alex noticed. Dorian Castell stood by the bleachers, hands in the pockets of his expensive coat, talking to one of the coaches. Alex's stomach turned as he watched Dorian glance over, give Caleb a nod, and offer a sleek, effortless grin. As Caleb ran to Alex's car, Alex caught Dorian's gaze. A long, still moment across the pavement. Dorian gave the faintest of head tilts, as if to say, "We both know where this is going." Alex watched him, jaw tight, and slid into the car. He didn't look back. That evening, Layla Moreno slipped quietly into Alex's office. She wore a black coat over a simple dress, no makeup, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. "They're planning to force a vote at tomorrow's meeting," she said, her voice tight. "Dorian's been promising new investors, international expansion deals. Serafina's been meeting privately with board members, selling the narrative that you're emotionally unraveling." Alex leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. "Let them try." Layla pulled out a folder, sliding it across the desk. "These are the final emails. Internal memos, asset transfers, personal payouts to silence harassment claims, and..." She hesitated, then added quietly, "There's a bonus." Alex opened the folder and froze. It was a wire transfer, from Serafina's personal account, to a private investigator. "She hired someone to monitor you," Layla whispered, "for months." For the first time in days, Alex felt his pulse spike. Not from fear, but from something sharper. Resolve. The next morning, the boardroom was a cathedral of glass and chrome. The skyline stretched out beyond the windows, the city indifferent and waiting. Serafina sat at the head of the table, immaculate in a cream suit, hair perfectly smoothed back. Dorian lounged nearby, one arm resting casually over the chair, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. Alex entered without hurry, nodding to the board members as they shifted uncomfortably. Layla walked in behind him, laptop under her arm. "Alex," Serafina said smoothly, "thank you for joining us. We were just discussing some important upcoming transitions." "Perfect timing," Dorian murmured. Alex smiled, calm, and took his seat. "Please, continue." The presentation rolled forward. Graphs, projections, investment offers. Serafina's voice was polished, her smile warm, her eyes cold. Dorian fielded questions with easy charm, laying out expansion plans. Fresh leadership, reinvigorated vision. Then came the vote. "Before we proceed," Alex said, his voice measured, "I'd like to share something." Layla stepped forward, connecting her laptop to the projector. The room dimmed. Emails flashed on screen. First, the memos, internal discussions between Serafina and Dorian about replacing Alex. Then, the asset transfers, proof of diverted company funds. Then, the harassment settlements, money funneled quietly to silence complaints tied to Dorian. And finally, the wire transfers, from Serafina to the private investigator. A slow, thick silence filled the room. Alex rose, adjusting his cufflinks. "I've spent 20 years building this company," he said quietly, "and I've spent the last 2 months watching 2 people I once trusted try to dismantle it for their own gain." He let his eyes pass slowly over the table, landing last on Serafina. "You can vote if you'd like," Alex said softly. "But you won't be voting on my removal. You'll be voting on theirs." By afternoon, the news had broken. Alex Carter retained full control of the company. Serafina Vale was suspended pending legal review. Dorian Castell was under internal investigation. Alex drove home with the radio off, the sound of the city filling the car instead. When he arrived, Caleb ran into his arms, laughing. "Dad! Guess what? I made captain!" Alex hugged him tight, breathing in the small, fierce weight of his son. "I'm proud of you, buddy," he whispered. But the storm wasn't over. 2 days later, Serafina's lawyers filed for full custody. Alex sat in his lawyer's office, reading the papers in slow, measured silence. "She's arguing emotional instability," his lawyer said grimly. "She's pushing hard, Alex." Alex rubbed a hand over his jaw, exhaling carefully. "She can push." That night, as Alex sat at the dining table, Caleb wandered in, barefoot, holding a glass of water. "Dad?" Caleb hesitated, small shoulders tense. Are you going to split up?" Alex's chest ached, but he kept his voice steady. "We already did, buddy. We just didn't tell the lawyers yet." Caleb's eyes shimmered, his mouth tightening. He climbed onto Alex's lap without a word, pressing his face against his father's shoulder. Alex wrapped his arms around his son, holding on like his life depended on it. In the days that followed, the fight shifted, from boardrooms to courtrooms, from asset sheets to custody reports. Serafina's legal team painted Alex as cold, detached, emotionally unstable. Alex's team pushed back with proof of her financial betrayal, of her absence from their son's life, of her coordinated effort to strip Alex of his company. But the moment that cracked everything open came from Caleb himself. Sitting quietly with the judge, small hands folded, voice shaking but clear, Caleb said the one thing no lawyer, no report, no argument could erase. "I know Alex isn't my real dad," he whispered. "But he's my dad." In the parking lot after the hearing, Alex crouched to meet Caleb's eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly. Caleb nodded quickly, then wrapped his arms tight around Alex's neck. Alex closed his eyes, pressing his face into his son's hair, feeling everything inside him crack wide and fierce and grateful. He was still here. They were still here. And no one, not Serafina, not Dorian, not the city, not the courts, was going to take that away. That night, as the city glowed around their apartment, Alex watched Caleb sleep. His phone buzzed on the table. A news alert. Breaking. Dorian Castell's hidden relationship with investor Mark Ellison surfaces amid scandal. Alex let the phone fall silent, a tired, sharp smile flickering across his face. The house was quiet. The battle wasn't over, but something in the air had shifted. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was the start of taking everything back. The day after the custody hearing, Alex Carter woke before dawn. The sun hadn't touched Manhattan yet, but the light inside him had changed. For weeks he'd been surviving, bracing for each new blow. From Serafina, from Dorian, from the courts. But now, something sharper had settled inside him. Resolve. He stood at the window of the penthouse, coffee cooling in his hands, watching the skyline come to life. Caleb was still asleep down the hall, and for the first time in months, Alex didn't feel like a man on the verge of losing everything. He felt like a man preparing for the next move. By 9 a.m., Alex sat across from Layla Moreno in his office. Layla had been his secret weapon, the underestimated associate who'd risked her career to bring him the truth. She sat forward now, fingers tapping on her laptop. "The media's having a field day," she murmured, showing Alex the headlines. "Power couple implodes. Serafina Vale faces corporate suspension. AI Titan. Alex Carter, betrayed but back in control. Dorian Castell silent amid rumors of investor affair." Alex barely glanced at the screen. "I don't care about the headlines." Layla looked up, dark eyes sharp. "You should. Public narrative matters, especially if Serafina's filing for full custody. They're setting you up as the villain, Alex." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "What do you suggest?" Layla smiled faintly. "We play the long game. We let them overplay their hand." Later that afternoon, Alex met Jason Landry in a quiet downtown office. The forensic accountant had been digging deeper, not just into Serafina's finances, but into Dorian's. "What am I looking at?" Alex asked, flipping through the latest report. Jason's voice was calm, almost apologetic. "It's layered, but the key is here." He tapped a highlighted section. "Dorian's not just corrupt. He's compromised. The harassment settlements are bad enough, but he's leveraged. The Mark Ellison affair? That's not just gossip. Ellison holds significant shares in Castell's side projects. If that breaks public, Dorian's empire crumbles." Alex leaned back slowly, something hardening in his jaw. "And Serafina?" Jason hesitated. "She's linked financially. If Dorian falls, she's tied to it. She's in deeper than she knows." That night, Alex sat with Caleb at the dinner table. The boy was quieter than usual, pushing pasta around on his plate. "Dad," Caleb said finally, voice small, "are you going to have to leave?" Alex's chest tightened. He set his fork down carefully. "No, buddy," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb looked up, eyes searching his father's face. "Even if Mom says you have to?" Alex reached across the table, covering his son's hand with his own. "I'm your dad. Nothing changes that." Caleb's face crumpled for a second, and then he scrambled around the table, wrapping his arms tight around Alex's waist. Alex held him, pressing his face into his son's hair, eyes squeezed shut against the ache in his throat. The next day, the final blow came, not from Alex, but from Dorian himself. The media leak was sudden, brutal, and perfectly timed. Breaking: Dorian Castell's hidden relationship with investor Mark Ellison confirmed amid corporate scandal. Photos surfaced. Private messages, statements from insiders. It was no longer just a matter of financial misconduct. It was a personal scandal, the kind that torched careers and reputations overnight. Alex sat at his desk, watching the news scroll across his screen, a quiet, tired smile pulling at his mouth. Serafina's carefully constructed world was collapsing, and she hadn't even seen the final wave yet. By evening, Serafina arrived at the penthouse. She let herself in with her key, her heels clicking across the marble floor. Alex stood waiting, arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said, voice brittle. Alex tilted his head slightly. "About what? The custody suit? The company you tried to steal? The fact that Dorian just burned you to save himself?" Her jaw tightened. "I made mistakes, Alex, but you don't have to turn Caleb against me." "I haven't said one bad word about you to Caleb," Alex said evenly. "You did that yourself." For the first time, something flickered in Serafina's expression, a tremor under the ice. That night, after Caleb was asleep, Alex sat with his lawyer, going over the final custody defense strategy. She's going to use everything, the lawyer warned. Therapists, school records, fabricated claims of emotional instability. We need to be ready. Alex nodded slowly. We are. In court, the battle was brutal. Serafina's team painted Alex as cold, obsessed with his company, emotionally unavailable. They presented carefully edited reports, cherry-picked statements from former colleagues, suggestions of parental detachment. But Alex's team countered with hard evidence: her financial betrayals, her corporate conspiracies, her months-long absence from their son's life, and then, the moment no one expected. Caleb was called into chambers. Alex sat outside, elbows on his knees, head bowed, as his son walked in to meet the judge. It felt like hours before Caleb emerged, small and brave, blinking hard against the cameras and the noise. The lawyer met Alex at the door. He asked to stay with you. Alex closed his eyes, his chest tightening so sharply it almost buckled him. The ruling came the next day. Primary custody awarded to Alex Carter. Visitation rights for Serafina, pending further review. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed, lights flashing, voices shouting. Alex emerged quietly, hand resting protectively on Caleb's shoulder, Layla a step behind them, eyes sharp and steady. Across the street, Serafina watched them, her arms crossed tightly, her face pale and drawn. Beside her, Dorian was nowhere to be seen. That night, Alex and Caleb sat on the balcony, the city stretching out before them. "Are we okay now, Dad?" Caleb asked softly. Alex looked down at his son, brushing a hand gently over his hair. "We're okay, buddy," he said quietly. "We're okay." They sat in the stillness, the city humming below, the air between them finally clear. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt something real settle in his chest. Not revenge, not victory, just the quiet, fierce peace of a father who had fought for his son and won. The boardroom windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the Manhattan skyline like a mural of steel and light. Alex Carter stood at the head of the long glass table, hands braced on the cool surface, gaze calm, breath even. Behind him, Layla Moreno set up her laptop, her fingers deft and silent. Across from Alex sat Serafina Vale, dressed in sharp white, her hair sleek, mouth set in a delicate line. To her right, Dorian Castell lounged with one ankle resting on his knee, a watchful smile curling at the corner of his mouth. Around them, the board members murmured nervously, shuffling papers, eyes darting between the power players at the table. This was it, the culmination of everything. "Let's get started," Alex said, his voice smooth but iron-edged. The weeks since the custody ruling had been a blur of strategy. Alex had stayed quiet in public, letting the media swirl around Serafina's collapse and Dorian's humiliation. But inside, he and Layla worked relentlessly, gathering data, tracking financial trails, building their final hand. The company's board, rattled by scandal, had been wavering. Whispers of new leadership floated in late-night calls, hints of fresh direction passed through shareholder meetings. Serafina and Dorian had been pushing hard behind the scenes, promising revitalization, international deals, glossy reinvention, but Alex knew better. He knew them. Layla clicked to the first slide, and Alex began. He spoke with precision, laying out the facts. Internal emails showing Serafina and Dorian colluding to push him out. Asset transfers tying Serafina to offshore accounts. Harassment payouts tied to Dorian, quietly hidden in expense sheets. And the final twist: evidence of insider trading, traced directly to Dorian's operations. The room fell into a taut, electric silence. Serafina shifted, a flicker of sharpness in her eyes. "Alex," she said smoothly, "this feels like a misunderstanding. We've all been under pressure and—" "No," Alex cut in, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. This isn't pressure. This is betrayal. Dorian leaned back, his smile tight. Come on, Alex. You can't seriously think you'll hold the board after this mess. The market wants fresh blood. Alex turned to him, calm. You're right. They want integrity. And they're about to see who has it. Layla hit play on a video clip. The audio crackled to life. It was Dorian's voice, laughing softly in a private meeting. We get Alex out, we flip the board, and by Q2, Serafina and I are running everything. A board member's voice asked, And Carter? Dorian chuckled. He'll fold. He's always been too soft to finish. The room went still. Alex watched Serafina carefully, watched the way her face paled, the way she darted a glance at Dorian, realization crashing into her like a wave she hadn't seen coming. The vote was swift, unanimous. Effective immediately, Serafina Vale was removed from all executive roles. Dorian Castell's partnership was terminated. As the board filed out in murmurs, Alex remained at the head of the table, shoulders back, breathing slow. Layla gathered the laptop, her face composed, eyes sharp. Serafina rose last, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her suit. You think you've won, she murmured, her voice tight. Alex met her gaze, level and unblinking. No, Serafina. I know I have. But the true collapse came later that night. The headlines exploded across every screen. Elite power couple implodes, Dorian Castell's secret gay affair exposed. It wasn't just the business fallout anymore. The press had gotten hold of everything. Dorian's affair with Mark Ellison, the high-profile investor, the years-long deception, the quiet deals brokered over pillow talk. Photos leaked. Screenshots surfaced. Dorian tried to spin it, tried to go on air, but the damage was done. Investors fled. Clients pulled contracts. His polished image disintegrated overnight. And Serafina? She was left holding the ashes. Alex watched the coverage from his apartment, Caleb sitting beside him on the couch, head resting against his shoulder. Dad, Caleb murmured, are we okay? Alex wrapped an arm around his son, kissing the top of his head. We're better than okay, buddy. Caleb smiled faintly, eyes drooping with sleep. Alex looked back at the screen, watching Serafina's face flash across it, drawn, brittle, haunted by the very media glow she'd once wielded so effortlessly. He felt no glee, no triumph, just a slow, deep breath, filling the space she'd once taken. The next morning, Serafina stood at his door. No cameras, no lawyers, no makeup. She looked smaller without the armor. Or maybe Alex had just finally stopped seeing her through the lens of their old life. I want to see Caleb, she said quietly. Alex studied her, then nodded once. Tomorrow. We'll arrange it. She flinched just slightly, as if the boundaries were suddenly real. When she turned to go, Alex stopped her. Serafina. She glanced back. You and Dorian underestimated one thing, Alex said softly. I don't break. For a flicker of a moment, her mouth trembled, but she turned, pulling her coat tighter, and walked away. That night, Alex took Caleb out for burgers. They sat in a booth at the corner diner, laughing over milkshakes, arguing about basketball stats. For the first time in months, Alex felt the tension unwind from his shoulders. The city lights outside blinked on and off, the world spinning fast as ever. But at that table, in that moment, he was exactly where he needed to be. When they got home, Caleb crashed into bed, out cold before Alex had even finished pulling up the covers. Alex lingered at the doorway, watching his son sleep, his chest tight with something fierce and quiet and real. This was the heart of it, not the boardroom, not the courtrooms, not the headlines. Here, this. Later, as Alex poured himself a late-night whiskey, his phone buzzed. Layla. "It's done," the text read. "Dorian's leaving the country tomorrow. Serafina's negotiating plea deals. You're clear." Alex set the phone down, a long exhale escaping his lungs. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. The lights, the towers, the shifting, relentless maze of it all. He had his company. He had his name. He had his son. And most of all, he had himself. When the world tried to erase him, Alex Carter had stayed. When they called him soft, he stood firm. When they tried to cut him down, he rose. And now, he wasn't just surviving. He was winning. The morning after Dorian Castell fled the country, the Manhattan skyline gleamed under pale spring light. Alex Carter stood at the window of his penthouse, sipping black coffee, his reflection faint in the glass. The headlines were everywhere. Dorian Castell leaves U.S. amid scandal. Serafina Vale faces legal heat. Deal talks underway. Alex Carter retains full control of Carter AI, focuses on family. For the first time in months, Alex felt his shoulders lower, the tension unwinding from his spine like a long-held breath. But victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like something quieter, weightier, something hard-earned. Caleb padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, hair messy from sleep. "Hey, Dad." "Morning, buddy," Alex murmured, ruffling his son's hair. Caleb pulled out a box of cereal, paused, then looked up. "Are we okay now?" Alex met his son's eyes, the same clear gaze he'd known since Caleb was a baby, the one that had anchored him through everything. "We're better than okay," Alex said softly. "We're home." Later that afternoon, Alex sat across from his lawyer, Jennifer Liu, in her sleek downtown office. "She's folding," Jennifer said, sliding papers across the table. "Serafina's agreeing to joint custody with primary residence remaining with you. She's also offering to drop all financial claims if you waive public statements." Alex exhaled, rubbing his jaw. She wants to save what's left of her reputation. Jennifer gave a small, dry smile. She's realized the fight is over. That evening, Serafina arrived at the apartment building. There were no cameras, no publicists, no bodyguards, just her, in a long gray coat, hair pulled back, face bare. Alex met her in the lobby. For a moment, they just stood there, two people who had once known each other, now strangers with too much history. "Thank you," she murmured finally, "for letting me see him." Alex nodded once. "You can come tomorrow. Dinner." She hesitated, as if searching for something more to say, then turned, walking away into the cold evening. That night, Alex tucked Caleb into bed, brushing a hand over his son's hair as Caleb's eyes drifted shut. For months, Alex had feared this moment, the quiet after the war, the stillness after the fight. But as he stood there now, he realized the fear was gone. He had kept his son. He had kept himself. And that was everything. The next morning, Alex met Layla Moreno for coffee. She looked lighter, her sharp eyes softened, her shoulders unburdened. "You're a free man," she teased, raising her cup. "How does it feel?" Alex smiled faintly. "Strange." Layla leaned forward, voice low. "You know you could have crushed her. Publicly, you still could." Alex shook his head slowly. "No." Layla studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Good," she said quietly. "Because you already won." Later that week, Alex walked into his company's headquarters. Employees turned as he passed, some nodding respectfully, others offering quiet smiles. There was no announcement, no formal return. Just Alex, stepping into the place he had built, shoulders squared, eyes clear. In the conference room, he stood at the head of the table. The leadership team gathered around. "We move forward," Alex said simply. "With integrity, with purpose." They nodded, listening not just to the words, but to the quiet authority behind them. That weekend, Alex and Caleb drove upstate, just the two of them, an old playlist humming through the car, the road rolling out under soft blue sky. They stayed in a small cabin by a lake, the kind of place without Wi-Fi, without headlines, without anything except the smell of pine and the crackle of firewood. At night, they sat on the porch, wrapped in old blankets, Caleb's head resting against Alex's shoulder. "Dad?" Caleb murmured. "Yeah, buddy? Are we gonna be okay?" Alex pressed a kiss to his son's temple, heart aching with a fierce, tender weight. "We already are," he whispered. Meanwhile, back in the city, Serafina Vale sat alone in a downtown apartment, not the glittering penthouse, but a furnished rental, temporary, anonymous. She stared at her phone, scrolling through headlines, watching as her name slipped further down the news cycle. Her fingers hovered over a message draft to Alex, then pulled away. She poured herself a glass of wine, staring out at the skyline she'd once ruled. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it meant to have nothing left but herself. Dorian Castell, on the other hand, was last seen stepping off a private plane in Lisbon, flanked by lawyers and a new business associate. Mark Ellison had disappeared from public view. The empire they'd tried to build had crumbled, and they had only each other to blame. On Sunday night, Alex and Caleb returned home, tired and sun-flushed, carrying bags of muddy sneakers and half-eaten snacks. As Alex tucked Caleb into bed, Caleb reached out, catching his father's hand. "I'm glad you're my dad," he whispered, voice heavy with sleep. Alex's throat tightened, and he squeezed Caleb's small fingers gently. "Me too, kid," he murmured. "Me too." Downstairs, Alex poured himself a whiskey, stepping onto the balcony. The city stretched out below, glowing, endless. He thought of everything they'd lost. And everything they still had. And for the first time in years, Alex Carter allowed himself to breathe. It was a Monday morning like any other, but to Alex Carter, it felt like a lifetime had passed since the last time he had stood in the corner office of Carter AI and looked out over Manhattan. The city pulsed below, ruthless, glittering, alive, just like always. But inside Alex, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in over a year, he wasn't standing on the edge of loss. He wasn't tightening his shoulders against the next blow. He was standing tall and whole. The office door opened softly, and Layla Moreno stepped in, a tablet in her hand, a faint smile pulling at her mouth. "Press wants a statement," she said. "They're calling it your comeback." Alex gave a quiet, wry laugh. "Let them call it what they want." Layla tilted her head. "You sure you're ready for all this again?" He turned from the window, eyes steady. "I never left." They shared a look, something like relief, something like respect, and then Layla slipped out, leaving him alone in the quiet hum of his office. Later that afternoon, Alex walked to Caleb's school. The final bell had just rung, and kids poured out in waves, laughing, shouting, slamming locker doors. In the crowd, Alex spotted him. Caleb, backpack slung over one shoulder, face flushed from gym, eyes bright when they caught sight of his dad. "Dad!" Caleb ran up, nearly barreling into Alex's chest. "Guess what? We won the science fair!" Alex knelt down, arms wrapping around his son, laughing into his hair. "I'm proud of you, buddy," he murmured, his throat thick. Caleb beamed. "I knew you'd come." Alex squeezed his eyes shut for half a second, holding on just a little tighter. "Always," he whispered. That evening, they ate takeout on the living room floor, Burgers and fries, no rules, no formal dinner. Caleb chattered nonstop about school and projects and friends. Alex watched him, heart full, marveling at the simple, profound weight of having his son safe, close, happy. The apartment no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a home. Later, when Caleb was asleep, Alex stood on the balcony, looking out at the city. The wind tugged lightly at his sleeves, carrying the muted sounds of traffic, laughter, sirens, life. His phone buzzed beside him. A message from Jennifer Liu. Serafina finalized the agreement. She's relocating. You have full primary custody. It's done. Alex stared at the screen for a moment, then set it down. He didn't need to reply. He didn't need to say anything at all. Across the city, Serafina Vale stood in an empty luxury apartment, cardboard boxes stacked neatly against the wall. Her reflection wavered in the window, flawless skin, sharp jawline, eyes that once commanded rooms. Now, she saw something different. A woman, alone, reduced, forced to reckon with the fallout of her own choices. She lifted a glass of wine, took a slow sip, and let the silence wrap around her like a thin, fragile shield. For the first time, there was no Alex to outmaneuver, no Caleb to pull toward her side, no Dorian to lean on, only herself. As for Dorian Castell, he was already tabloid history, snapped at a beach club in the Mediterranean, laughing beside strangers, his once prominent name now reduced to a whisper, an afterthought in business circles, a cautionary tale in society columns. He'd gotten exactly what he chased: temporary escape, permanent disgrace. Back in Manhattan, Alex sat quietly in his study, flipping through an old photo album. There were pictures from before the storm, vacations, holidays, Caleb as a toddler on his shoulders, Serafina smiling by his side. He closed the album softly, exhaling. Those memories were real, but they didn't define him anymore. The next morning, Alex woke early, pulling on running shoes as the sky barely lightened over the skyline. As he ran along the river, breath steady, feet hitting pavement, he felt the cold air cut into his lungs and smiled faintly. He was here. He was whole. He had everything that mattered. When he got home, Caleb was up, still in pajamas, a messy tower of Legos on the floor. "Dad, help me with the spaceship?" Alex laughed, kneeling down. "You got it, buddy." They spent the morning on the floor, building, laughing, knocking over pieces and starting again. Outside, the world rushed on. Inside, Alex Carter built something better. Not an empire, a life. In the quiet after the storm, what remains is not the chaos, not the betrayal, not the shattered plans or the public headlines. What remains is the core of who we are when everything else has been stripped away. When titles fade, fortunes change, and relationships crumble under the weight of choices we cannot unmake. At the heart of every struggle lies one unshakable truth. It is not the world's approval that saves us, nor the grand victories measured by numbers or applause. It is the small, often invisible acts of showing up. The mornings we choose to get out of bed when grief pins us down. The quiet evenings spent listening rather than lashing out. The moments when we choose dignity over vengeance, love over pride, truth over illusion. We live in a world that glorifies winning, but rarely asks what's worth winning for. The lesson isn't found in conquering others or standing tallest in the room. It's found in standing with integrity when no one's watching, in holding on to what matters when everything around you tells you to let go. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Strength does not mean never breaking. And healing does not mean returning to who you once were. It means becoming someone who carries the scars with grace, not shame. In the end, we are not remembered for the power we amassed, the wealth we guarded, or the public image we maintained. We are remembered for the lives we touched when we had every reason to close our hearts and walk away. We are remembered for the people we protected when protecting them cost us everything. We are remembered for the love we gave when it was hardest to give. Thank you for being part of this journey, for witnessing a story not just of betrayal and loss, but of resilience, of quiet triumph, of the long, often lonely road back to wholeness. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments. Your voice matters here. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story of resilience, healing, and unexpected twists. We are grateful to have you as part of this community. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that shape us the most.